Episode 7, Roots of Liberty 3. Choose Your Own Masters, the Germanic Influence on Modern Liberty.
Then Halfdane's son presented Beowulf with a gold standard as a victory gift, an embroidered banner, also breast mail and a helmet, and a sword carried high. That was both precious object and token of honor, so Beowulf drank his drink at ease. It was hardly a shame to be showered with such gifts in front of the whole troops. There haven't been many moments, I am sure, when men exchanged 4 such treasures at so friendly a sitting. An embossed ridge, a band lapped with wire, arched over the helmet, head protection to keep the keen ground cutting edge from damaging it when danger threatened, and the man was battling behind his shield. Next the king ordered 8 horses with gold bridles to be brought through the yard into the hall. The harness of one included a saddle of sumptuous design, the battle seat where the son of Halfdane rode when he wished to join the swordplay. Wherever the killing and carnage were the worst, he would be to the fore, fighting hard. Then the Danish prince, descendant of Inge, handed over both the arms and the horses, urging Beowulf to use them well. And so their leader, the lord and god of coffer and strong room, with customary grace bestowed upon Beowulf both sets of gifts. A fair witness can see how well each one behave.
Hi, I hope you enjoyed my co-host reading Beowulf. And again, this is the Iron Rod podcast. We're at episode 7. If you haven't listened to the first 6, none of this will make sense. No, that is actually an inside joke. We try to do our episodes as a standalone type thing, but definitely the full context will help. And as we mentioned already, we're in a mini-series of the Roots of Liberty, and we're talking about the Germans. And this reading of Beowulf does remind me that you have pointed out there's an English connection with the Germans. Tell me more about what you meant by that.
Well, first of all, we're not talking about the Germans. We're not talking about the lederhosen wearing, beer drinking, people with with a somewhat ambivalent relationship with us. We're talking about Germanics, which of course modern Germans are for the large part Germanic, but not all Germanics or people descending from Germanic tribes are what you call Germans or even German adjacent. So on our table right now there are 2 books which unfortunately we don't have time to delve into. One of them is a 1911 excellent little book that very less known by an Oxford scholar named J.R. Green. The name of the book is Short History of the English People. The other book is the first volume of Carlyle's biography of Frederick the Great of Prussia, which the nice thing about the first volume, it gives you a crash course. Almost half of it is a crash course of the history of Prussia up to the birth of Frederick. So, what do we know about this? What we know about this is Prussia in the 19th century, in which Carlyle acts and in which Green also acts. I know the book is from 1911, but we should think I think about everything before the First World War as part of the long 19th century. They both in the 19th century. England is not only the freest country in Europe, probably in the world, and is very prosperous both economically and militarily by this freedom. It is the standard bearer of freedom across Europe. And I'm sorry, this is an American podcast, but no, America doesn't count because nobody cares about America in Europe. America is in the other side of the Atlantic. It's doing its own thing. It doesn't have much of the problems Europe have or much have of the social condition Europe has, specifically because it was designed specifically not to have them to get rid of whatever is left from them. So it doesn't matter. In Europe, England is the freest European country. What is the least free European country? And no, the answer is not Russia, because Russia is not a European country. Russia is its own thing, and I'm not making a snide remark about Russia being an Asiatic country or any kind of this racial nonsense. No, Russia is not a European country because it's not run the way European countries run, and it's completely different beast. The least free European country in 19th century is Prussia, which later on unifies Germany and essentially imposes its own system on the entirety of Germany.
So the small Prussia becomes the big Germany, and they bring back the name that was used since ancient times. Yeah, but continue.
So you would have thought that these two countries, Prussia, Germany, and England, Britain, would be of the very different origin, especially if you believe in the path-dependent determinist school of history, which is that the same people would always that the Frenchmen would always go along the same path of French history that they took. That the same people will always make the same decision history-wise because it's part of the nature. But it's not true. As a matter of fact, the Prussian kings and the Prussian nobility comes from the same root and the same linguistic root and the same civilizational tradition, but over the long march of 1,000 years, the English people developed completely different traditions from their cousins on the continent.
And just to clarify, or is this something that would take us too much in a digression? When you speak of the English people having the same ancestors, let's say, as the people in Germany proper, that they're both Germanic in a sense in terms of ethnicity, are you speaking about the Saxons, the Anglo-Saxons, or their Norman overlords?
Well, actually both, because the Normans, of course, the Saxon obviously come from Saxony. The Angles come from what is now basically Denmark, the Angles and the Utes, etc. The Normans, as the name suggests, are Norsemen that colonized northern France, and those Norsemen come from just across the Kattegat, or the Danish Straits, as we call them in English. They come from Norway, or sometimes from Denmark. Actually, they are people who live just across the water from where the ancestors of the English people lived. As a matter of fact, some of them lived in the same lands the ancestors of the English left when they invaded the Roman province of Britannia. And it's possible that some of them are actually the same people. They are the cousins left behind.
Yes, the more Viking cousins, so to speak.
And the Prussians, now, the native Prussians, the old Prussians as they call, were either Slavic or Baltic people. But they are conquered by German people. They go through a process of Germanization by northern Germans. Most of them from Saxony. And
so when are we speaking? Are we speaking that Germany was severely depopulated during the 30 Years' War, which we haven't discussed that much in this podcast yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yet.
Yes, but this
but is this happening?
This happened before, way before.
Much
way before. We're talking about the 13th, 15th century. We're talking about the Teutonic Knights, the Teutonic Order, and the Livonian Order doing their own thing during the Northern Crusades, which is a whole different topic. And both those orders recruit heavily in northern Germany. The dynasty that established Prussia as an independent state, the Hohenzollerns, are personally from southern Germany, but they're Germans, and they lead. And by the way, this is not that different from the history of England, because England is also a colonized country. Because most of the people living in Britannia at the time of the Anglo-Saxon conquest are Celts. They are not Germanics. They are Celts, somewhat Romanized, not exactly because Britannia was never fully Romanized, but they are Celts. They are not Germans, but they integrated the Anglo-Saxon either completely replace the aristocracy or somehow managed to integrate the locals so much that very soon everybody in England speaks what we call now Old English, which is the amalgamation of all the different Germanic languages of Anglic and Uten and Frisian and Saxon. And very soon everybody speaks that. Everybody think of himself as Anglo-Saxon, as West Saxon, Southern Saxon, as East Anglic, or as and all the little and all those little subdivisions of Anglo-Saxon England.
So many people incorrectly assume that, because other European countries are based primarily on Latin, so is English. So you're actually saying that it's based.
It's a
our
Germanic.
English is based on Middle English and so on, but Old English is a Germanic language.
It's a Germanic language with some Celtic elements and with some Celtic elements, and of course Middle English, which give birth to our English, to our modern English, which
has given birth to emojis. No, that's a joke.
I'm sorry.
We no longer speak modern English. We now speak a texting language.
I'm sorry. Emojis and general internet lingo is more like a tumor on the brain of English.
I thought we were returning to like Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Oh, yes. That's hence the tumor.
All progress is regress. This is one of my theories of political life. But you were saying but our English derives all the way to these German languages.
To those Germanic languages,
which themselves are similar to Latin in that they're both Indo-European languages.
Yes.
So those two things, for example, would have much more in common as compared to Chinese.
Yes, absolutely. Or Hebrew, or Hebrew or Arabic for that matter. Now, but that's interesting because the linguistic conquest of Britannia is so complete that only in the most rocky, hard to reach, never conquered regions of Wales. By the way, Wales just means land of the foreigners, land of those who don't speak our tongue. That's what the word Welsh means to this day in German. They still speak the old Britannic tongue, and even in the mostly independent Celtic country to the north, in Scotland, the richest and most fertile regions, including the royal court, namely the valleys, the lowlands as they call them, adopt a variant of Anglo-Saxon called Scots.
Okay, so I'm understanding that in the usual fashion, when you have a new assimilating dominant power, if it's cultural or religious, it doesn't necessarily reach all the crevices where in the same way sometimes paganism holds out for many centuries after Christianity is officially established.
Yes. Oh, speaking of which, Britannia was a Christian island before the Anglo-Saxon showed up, and they were pagan. It took the church 100 years to reconvert Britannia, and they didn't get any help from the local clergy because the local clergy hated because the Irish clergy hated those newcomers so much that they refused to convert them because they wanted them all to go to hell.
Fascinating. So I think the essential point, and this is all by way of introduction, the essential point is that in a sense that the most civilized country, as you're saying, of 19th century, or let's say the most free country.
The most free country, because both countries are eminently civilized.
Yes.
That's why I left Russia out, because Russia is a very, very medieval, primordial country still. In the 19th century, there are still places. Most of the population is illiterate. The country is a completely different level. I
mistakenly commingled civilization and democracy, but the freest place,
is
Britain,
England.
They're actually the same people in a very significant fashion.
In Prussia, or at least very similar people. So why? And this is, by the way, why I don't believe in any kind of deterministic theory of history. No race, no economic conditions. Because if you look at the climate and the economic condition of Prussia, they're also very similar to England. It's a fairly rainy place. You put you spit an apple seed in the ground and it grows before your eyes. In the way of speaking,
It's funny because I did read a certain Roman historian saying that, the Germans must be originally from Germany because it's such an unhospitable place. Why else would they remain there if not for the fact that they're from there?
You see, because the Romans practiced wheat-based economy, and wheat needs sun to grow ripe
Germany
and dry.
was very frigid, especially back
Yes,
then.
but the Germans didn't care because the ancient Germanics were absolutely happy to live off the forest, which they tended to, like the Native Americans. But
So let me give a further introduction to the Germans. And you speak about the ancient Germans. First, I would make the point that, to my understanding, no one even knows what the word German means.
yeah, there are a few theories. First of all, one of the theories that it's an ancient Germanic word meaning spearman. Ger is spear apparently, and man being man. Some people say it means kinsman. Some people think that it means something else entirely, but or maybe it's the name of some tribe that is now lost to history. That because the Romans had a tendency to name entire ethnic groups after a single tribe. For example, the reason we speak about the Greeks and not the Hellenes when we are not starting to be smug and pedantic, yes, is because the first Greek people that the Romans encountered were colonists from the Graiki. So they asked those people, well, who are you people? We are the Graiki. Oh, okay. And those people are also, they're related to you? Oh yeah, sure. They're related to us. They are the same thing that we are. Oh, so they're also Graiki. You know what? Never mind. Okay, fine. They're also Graiki. And the reason we speak about the Gauls, who calls themselves Celts, not Gauls, is because they made one single group that calls themselves the Gauls, and so decided, okay, so everybody who lives over there and speak more or less in the same tongue is a Gaul.
Yes, and this, in fact, division itself is a sort of quote-unquote modern innovation. So in the 2nd century BC, the Romans didn't necessarily understand much of a difference between the Gauls and Germans while they were encountering them. For them, they were all barbarians, and they gradually learned the hard way.
But the Germans were more barbarian than the Gauls.
Right, but and certain tribes living on the west of the Rhine were actually German, and vice versa. And,
yes.
And there was you could see some of the confusion in Julius Caesar and so on.
Yes.
But going back, the mystery of people not exactly understanding even what German means in the old language, I think speaks a little bit to how much of the history of these German people is shrouded in darkness, in part because they are barbarian. They don't have a written language. So we have to...
Or rather, they have, but the use of it is so exclusive to a few groups of priests or magicians that... and yes, they were great believers in magic, the Germans, and magicians that used them for absolutely mystical purposes, that they might as well not have a written language.
Right, and in terms of us understanding what they're all about, they might as well not have a written language.
There's a beautiful part in the Elder Edda in which Odin, the chief god of the Germanics, mention all the runes that he knows. But he said what each of them is good for, but he doesn't say to you which of them is good for which. And he said those are the runes that I know, meaning most magicians know even less. And he is Odin, he is the greatest of all the gods and all the magicians, which by the way, the line between the two is kind of blurry in Germanic mythology, because he knows so many runes.
So let me just say, since you brought this up, that the Viking mythology that we all know and love very much is connected to, or maybe directly inherited from the German mythology?
It's the Vikings are the Vikings, or rather the Norse, Germanic. They're the last people. They're the last Germanic tribe to come into into contact with what we may call Mediterranean civilization.
Or civilization generally.
You can say that, even though you can argue that what they had at this point can be called civilization to a degree.
You could argue. Okay, continue.
An inferior and younger civilization, but civilization nonetheless. And as a result, they are the last people who still believe, at that point, in the ancient Germanic gods. So for a very long time, people thought, okay, so the Norse gods are basically the Germanic gods. So if we want to know what the ancestors of the English, or of the English or the French, yes, the French are also Germanic, by the way, partially, or the Germans believed in before they all before they all
formed the modern states.
Before they all ate the cracker. Before they all ate the cracker and drank the wine, as they say, you need to translate everything that the Norse believe, and this is what they believe. But it's not true, because religion changed over time, especially polytheistic religion. It's also changed from region to region. So we can say that what the Norse people believed in the 6th, 7th, 8th century was a very late iteration of what most Germanic peoples believed in, and it was a very a very unique local flavor, obviously. But so it gives us a shadow of understanding what kind of beliefs they have. For example, we know that the Anglo-Saxon did worship Odin, or Wotan as they called him, before they converted to Christianity, but we are not sure how much of it we're not sure how much of everything else they believed in.
So let me bring an interesting example for our modern audience. Everyone knows about Thor because there's Marvel movies. Is it Marvel or DC? I never know the difference.
Marvel.
So there's these great Marvel movies about Thor. He's the god of lightning. And in fact, in one of the more recent movies, it's a whole big deal that his father tells him, "You're not the god of hammers. You're the god of lightning."
Yes.
This is what happens when his hammer gets destroyed.
Oh, and this is actually a very good point in the myth. By the way,
so Thor is the god of lightning. So Thor is the most modern innovation of that, and that's the Viking one. And Donner is the German predecessor for that, and he's also carrying around the hammer or some sort of club that becomes a hammer, and he is associated with the Greek god or Greek demigod Hercules.
Yes.
So you definitely see the typecast of gods, and B, over here the connection between the Germans and the Vikings.
To this day, a thunderbolt is called in German Donnerstag, which
also means Thursday because it's Thor's day.
Yes, exactly. So Donnerstag means Thor's stick, not even Thor's hammer. And by the way, Thursday. So many people say, okay, Thursday is after Thor, but not exactly, because the term Thor or Thorster actually means something along the line of a god or a demigod in Old English. So not only Thor is a god, he's the quintessential Germanic demigod. But that's besides the point.
Right. Although this does establish something of their civilization and or let's say society, because whether they are a civilization is a debated point. And I think in the next segment, we're going to take a slight break now. We'll continue speaking about the origins of the Germans, and I will describe how we see them through the lens of when they met the Romans. All right, we're continuing episode 7. Are we on episode 7?
We are on episode 7, as a matter of fact.
Of the Iron Rod, and we're speaking of the Iron Rod of tyrants, and the opposite of tyranny is liberty, and we're discussing the emergence of liberty, hence our mini-series.
Or at least the modern conception of liberty.
Yes, which is, weed and hookers in Las Vegas. Is that what liberty is all about? Oh, that's libertine. Sorry, I always confuse those two words.
Yes, you'll have to... Marquis de Sade actually, that Marquis de Sade make the distinction very clear.
But actual liberty. Anyway, so we're speaking about the Germans, and the point I was beginning to make is we really only see the Germans from the point of view of the Romans. And I think this is significant insofar as if the Germans were on a different corner of the map, and all their characteristics and all their fierceness and the fact that they were a head taller than everyone else, and that they...
Which means they were not malnourished. Malnourished people are not a head taller than anybody else.
They ate well. And that they covered themselves in black ink from top to bottom, so only their eyes kind of peeked out in a very fearsome appearance. But if they were doing this somewhere else, we would not even be discussing them. They wouldn't even exist. They might as well fall off the edge of the earth.
Think about the Slavs. We don't know anything about them until the 5th century.
And there are no podcasts dedicated to doing this. Or at least very few.
Okay.
But the point is, so the significance that they have is in their stark contrast to the Romans, and in that they made the Roman lives miserable, and that they fought the Roman Empire, for 6-7 centuries. And that they directly weakened the Romans and maybe ultimately even defeated them. So, in a sense, that their entire importance is somewhat of their relationship with our friends the Romans. And this is very important because I would contend, this is an arguable point, the Romans are probably the greatest empire to ever exist. So the people that bring them down to their knees are going to be very significant any way you slice it.
Yes, the Romans foil and nightmare and mirror of virtue and mirror of virtue. They are depends which Roman you ask. They are either the avenging angels of the gods, ready to visit terrible punishment on the corrupt empire. They are demons from the pagan Roman version of hell, equivalent of hell, or from the Christian Roman hell. They are better than us. They are worse than us. Their civilization is a mirror of our forefathers, or maybe they are completely foreign to us. They are savages. They are noble defenders of the empire. They are enemies. They are friends. What are they? Nobody is sure.
Right, and the Romans first encountered the Germans fairly violently, and for much of their relationship it was defined by violence. But let us, for a moment, and we will revert back, let us skip the first time they met them and violently defeated them, or the second time they met them under Julius Caesar. Let's skip to the third kind of act, and that is one of the most significant battles the Romans ever fought, and that is Teutoburg Forest.
Yes.
You could even say that this is the greatest military disaster in the Roman Empire history, and there were many, and even some other ones against the Germans. And the Romans had some other very significant military disasters. Or would you agree with that?
I agree with that. It's actually, I would say, it's equivalent to the collapse of the Tang Empire, in the sense that this is the time in which a civilization spanning empire lost its grip on a foreign people in a lower level of civilization, or at least in a civilization that has less things that we define as civilization, and as a result they never managed to get control of them, and eventually got controlled by them, got conquered by them. Because that's exactly the trajectory that the Tang dynasty in China went through when they lost control over the Turkic hordes in the 12th century.
Yeah, so very significant. One of the tangible manifestations of this was the banners carried by the legion. So the Roman legion is the largest, subdivision of unit in the Roman military, maybe 6,000 troops strong, and divided, in different ways, pre-Marius reform and post-Marius. But the smallest group is 60 or 100 soldiers, but you have 6,000 soldiers, let's say, or 8,000, plus other auxiliaries and cavalry and so on. But this is the basic machine of destruction, able to conquer all before that.
And it's a self-sufficient unit.
Self-sufficient. Well, much more self-sufficient after the Marius reforms, where,
absolutely.
where the troops had to carry their own food.
Everything
and so
is
on.
better after the Marius reform. It was the bee's knees.
Yeah, and Marius was actually a very significant character vis-a-vis the Germans, but from earlier. But a legion has a standard. They have a Roman eagle, and this was later, reintroduced by Napoleon and by other people.
Oh, and by the Americans too.
Americans in the Civil War, we had eagles, some actual real physical eagles. But the Romans lost 3 eagles in this battle. 2 of them to the Germans, and 1 lost in the swamp or whatnot. And this is very significant because this is something that you would fight, tooth and nail. You would pretty much need to have every single soldier decimated, destroyed, annihilated.
The European tradition of losing the colors as the ultimate disgrace for a military unit is actually derived from there.
Yes, and it's fairly usual for an entire legion to be destroyed, and it happens from time to time.
We, the Jews, as a matter of fact, did it
Once or twice, right?
Yes.
Right. So it's fairly unusual for this sort of thing to take place. And the war military disasters where more troops were killed, but this sort of thing in some ways is the worst. And let us now go to Rome Total War. Now, we are a very new age show. We are not stuffy academics, are we?
Well,
we discuss video games. We can be.
Well, and also Marvel movies.
Well,
but those are made by complete and utter hacks.
So Rome Total War is one of the Total Wars. One of the Total War entries, and the Total War series is one of the most successful, from a financial point of view and for the amount of users they have video games out there.
Aesthetically too.
But in Rome Total War, which is almost 20 years old, is probably the best one of the Total War games.
Yes.
And one of the historical battles you could play is this battle through the Brick Forest, where the Romans are kind of annihilated. You get to play as the Romans. So your job is to reverse the history of things and come out of there. I'm now going to play on YouTube this introduction to the battle on the Rome Total War game. Give a listen.
This is the year 9 AD. The place, Germania, beyond the Empire's border. This is the army of Quintilius Varus, sent north by Augustus to pacify the Germans. Guided by a trusted local chieftain, Arminius, the legion is heading back to winter camp. But life on the frontier can be treacherous, brutal, and short. Thanks to Arminius, the Romans are marching into danger. Hidden in the forest, there's an army of savage German warriors, fired up and thirsty for Roman blood. As the danger becomes obvious, Varus gallops to the head of the column. He has to get his men back to the fort before sunset. Once darkness falls, the Germans will be able to kill them at will. This is a chance for Varus to prove that he has the right stuff, that he is a noble Roman, and a noble Roman general at that. If he isn't, he'll be a noble Roman corpse by sunset, and no one will get home. The camp is in sight. One last push by the Romans should see them home, but without enough survivors, this will be a black day for Rome and a massive victory for the barbarians.
So there we have it, Battle of Teutoburg Forest. And not to keep you in suspense, what really happened was that the Romans didn't get home to their fort, and they were all massacred, 3 legions worth.
And Arminius, by the way, about the name Arminius.
First, tell us how he died. That's a fun story.
Well, he was in an assembly with a bunch of other noblemen of his tribe.
So Arminius is the German traitor who led the Romans into ambush.
Was he a traitor? Okay.
He had formal rank in the Roman Empire.
Okay, but when we actually discuss...
Yes, but he had dual loyalties, and this is actually something that's very significant in terms of our understanding of how civilizational people interact with barbarians and kind of want to absorb them into their host culture.
This is actually what we want to talk about here in this episode, about what was the contribution of the Germanics to liberty as Germanics, not as anything else. So
not just to point out the barbarians. Yes, but a traitor or not. So what happens?
What happened is Arminius is a very important man because he's not just so happened. We're not talking about some orphan who wandered into the Roman lines and became and was adopted by a kind centurion and was raised on Roman virtues and rose through the rank. No. These things don't happen in Rome. This man was the son of a very important German chieftain of the tribe of the Cherusci, and he was given away as a hostage to Rome to guarantee his father's good behavior and to show goodwill and trustworthiness of his father, for what that's worth. And the Roman, and he was a teenager when he went to Rome, and he was integrated into the auxiliary. He was never in the legion because because while eventually he did earn a Roman citizenship, his main value was as a recruiting tool of other people from his tribe and from other Germanic peoples, and he commanded them. And the funny thing is, we don't actually know his real name. In the time when German nationalism was big in the 19th century, a lot of German scholars invented the idea that his real name was Hermann, which is a very, very German name, but Hermann, especially as it means something like master man, first of all, the name Hermann is actually a late German name. It's not an ancient German name. It comes from
it's like calling someone today Bob and saying that someone 3,000 years ago was named Bob.
Yeah, it's like saying I couldn't have said it better, especially since the word Herr, which is like the German version of Sir or Mister, actually originally comes from Herr, which means somebody who joins the Herd or the Herd, which is the 100, which is kind of the basic group of militia, of tribal militia that you raise when something is afoot. So it doesn't. So anyhow, leave alone the question of his name. His name is Arminius. We don't know who gave him his name. What was his German name? We don't know if his German name actually even resembled the term Arminius. We know the Romans called him Arminius, and that's good enough for us. And he quote unquote betrays the Roman. He assumed his leadership role over his father's tribe. His father is pushed aside, or something else, due to him giving over 3 legions of Romans to the hand of his tribe and coalition of other tribes, and that essentially closes the chapter over the attempt, or the Roman attempt, to create a province beyond the Rhine. After that, the Romans, as the kids say today, noped out of Germania. They built a giant line of fortification all along the Rhine. They have one single bridge over the Rhine in a place called Colonia Agrippinensis, which you may know as Cologne in Germany, in northwestern Germany, and basically this bridge is always guarded day and night, for fear that the Germans because if the Germans ever cross the Rhine again, the Romans know it won't be pretty, and the Romans use it to make raids into Germania. It's not a point of cultural or peaceful cultural exchange, at least not officially. Um, and the Romans and this line of fortification that goes all the way from the mouth of the Rhine to to what is now Switzerland and along the Danube is what they call the limes, or the lines, the limit. That's where we get the word limit. This is the eternal border of, and Caesar Augustus decrees in his will, in his last will and testament, that this is the eternal northern border of the empire. He doesn't want anyone ever going into Germania ever again, because he knows next time that the Romans meet the Germans meet the Germans on a civilization level, it won't be pretty. Or maybe he just doesn't want anyone to succeed where he failed.
Augustus may have had some sort of nervous breakdown over this whole affair.
Oh yes, he closed himself for a few days in his room and demolishing rare pieces of art, according to one account.
And according to another, he banged his head against the wall, and he asked for the Roman commander Varus, I think, give me back my legions.
Yes.
And according to all accounts, I think he let his hair grow for 30 days.
Yes, which was like in Rome was an extreme show of grieving.
Yeah. So, but just to give the epilogue, this German chieftain traitor, I would say, ended up being killed in some sort of squabble by his father-in-law, most probably.
Yes.
So, a kind of ridiculous end to definitely a very remarkable life story.
But you will see that in Germania, that's a very Germanic way for a chieftain and a hero to end his life.
Yes. So, I mean, although not that different than the civilized world at this time. So let us then go back a little bit to, if you could tell us about the German invasion, the first time, and some of those events, just to give our audience understanding about what happened 130 years before Teutoburg Forest.
Well, did you ever read the Conan the Barbarian books?
Yes, I've read all of them, but some of our audience may not have.
So his tribe is called the Cimbri in the books, right? If I remember correctly.
Cimmerian,
yes.
Cimmerian, yes.
Now this is based on a group that the Romans encountered called the Cimbri, and which actually they met them together with another group called the Teutones, and considering that both the Cimbri and Teutones were from the other side of Europe when they met them.
So these guys are literally from the other side of Europe, because they were in modern-day Scandinavia,
Denmark, as a matter of fact,
and they had like some sort of bad thunderstorm or something like that, and they're like, we're getting out of here.
We're not sure what happened.
Some sort of environmental thing, though.
We are not sure what happened. Something environment. Either they had a bad harvest, which for a group of people living in a very primitive agricultural condition, it's not very good news. There might be a flood. There might be something else, or maybe the tribal elders and the magicians decided that the gods are not happy with the current location. But either way, they just immigrated all the way through Europe, from Denmark down to the sunny shores of what is now the French Riviera, and causing havoc along the way, because you have.
And we're talking about a massive amount of people.
We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people.
Possibly 200,000 warriors with their families.
Oh, no. In the last battle, they lost 300,000 warriors. So this is the Romans literally never saw something like that. and they lost.
So this is in 113 BC.
Yes.
So just to give, obviously, a reference for our audience, I mean, 113 BC, that's easier because it's 113 years before, Jesus walks around. But this is a half a century before Julius Caesar. It's a century before Teutonic Forest. And this is 90 years after the Romans defeat the Carthaginians decisively in the Second Punic War.
Yeah, so the Romans think after the Second Carthaginian War, okay, we got discovered. The Western Mediterranean is ours. All that's left to do is to solidify our control over the eastern Spain, mine all the silver. We can create an alliance system in Gaul to make sure our northern border is secure. Because remember, the northern border of the Republic is the Alps at this point. Before Julius Caesar massacres half of Gaul, and then we can control all the trade in the Western Mediterranean, and in the Eastern Mediterranean too. We have a very good advantage. So we are fixed. We are good. And then
every good plan survives until you meet the Germans.
Exactly. Every good plan survives until you. Who are these people, and why are they so tall, and how and
why are they not wearing shirts?
And why are they not wearing shirts? And what the hell are they wearing on the lower parts? Those were the first. It was not the first time the Romans met very tall people wearing pants, but this probably was the least pleasant of them.
So the Germans pour in, and then the Romans fight them, lose 4 battles straight.
Yes.
To them.
Their first battle is in Noreae.
And their best commander is where?
He's in Africa.
He's North Africa.
He's in North Africa, defeating an old ally of them, the king of Numidia, who decided, no, I'm not gonna be a vassal of the Romans. I'm not gonna be a puppet king. My people helped them defeat the Carthaginians. We were promised the lands that they gave us, fair and square. We have equal status. How dare they intervene when I murder my half brother and may or may not poison my father and in an interclan warfare within my kingdom. This is not their business. This is strictly our internal business. In a line that reverberated throughout the ages every time a tyrant does something, and then he's reminded that there is a relatively free republic on his border that's much stronger than him.
All right, so eventually the Romans do recall who's their general. Who are we talking about?
Oh, Gaius Marius.
We mentioned before about the Marius reforms. He's a very significant character, which we're not going to discuss now. But we were talking about liberty, so let's at least mention how many times he was elected consul and how many times you're supposed to.
I believe that I have it.
Well, you're supposed to, I believe, only be elected once. You can't be elected twice in a row. That is illegal.
Yes. Oh, and you must represent you must register
You must be in person. So Julius Caesar had this issue.
And you must be elected in person.
Right. Caesar had this issue that he didn't want to come in person. He was worried they were going to arrest him and give him problems.
Yes.
So he was trying to make, eventually he was able to be also an absentee.
But he couldn't have done it if not for Gaius Marius, because Gaius Marius is busy. He is organized. The first time he is elected consul, he is elected consul on his platform is, I would defeat the Germans. I would show the Germans what's what, and that we are Rome, and you can't.
Politician who fulfills his campaign promises. That's amazing.
Well, yes, but the problem is nobody believe all the good, and by good I mean the people who think it was the good Romans. All the aristocrats and sophisticated people think he can do it. Why? He has only a year. In a year, all he wants to do is to organize the army a little bit, which Gaius Marius, everybody agrees, is very good at. Pass a few laws, and then it'll be time for the next guy. The thing is, and that's what he does. He's staying in northern Italy. He's training equipping an entirely new army, and then
in his defense, at the time, the Germans are pillaging in other places, so he's giving them a chance to do that while he's getting ready. So it's not like he was doing this while the Germans are ravaging Italy.
Oh, of course not. But I get. But look,
So,
the German.
so he's using the time to his advantage. This is
Yes.
very causal.
So the last time before that, the last time the Romans fought the Teutones and the Cimbri was in 105 BC.
And this is the fourth of the four battles that the Romans lost that we mentioned. And over there, they lose their entire army. It's complete disaster.
Yes, and apart from the commander of the army, the consul Piso, who loses his two sons in and this battle takes place in Arausio, or as we call it now, Oranier, in southern France, very very safely inside of Gaul, on the right side of the Alps as far as the Romans are concerned. But it's very disturbing, to say the least.
The Romans, there's two people in charge. They get backed up against the river. They make a lot of tactical mistakes that Marius would never make, for example, or Julius Caesar.
Yes, Piso actually gets, and when word comes out that Piso somehow managed to save the gold that he looted on campaign from the Gauls, and then that somehow this gold disappeared, the Romans are not happy with him, and they prosecute him for corruption. So this poor man not only lost two of his sons and his entire army, he had to live out his life in exile for a while. But he had the gold. He definitely stole the gold.
Right. So these are the disastrous battles. The Romans are losing 60,000 troops in one battle. Not good policy. Marius shows up and he defeats the Germans twice in a row.
Yeah.
And one of the battles, you're saying he killed
300,000 Germans.
Yeah, 300,000 plus their family, or
yes.
I don't, the exact numbers escape me at the moment. I mean, these are ancient numbers, which I'm of the sort of thinking that I don't necessarily do away with the ancient numbers because modern historians are uncomfortable with them.
Yeah,
which is always the case.
Well,
modern historians always minimize the amount of soldiers killed, Battle of Cannae, Battle of River Trebia, every single time.
Think of ancient military numbers as like modern Chinese GDP numbers. They are always inflated, but you can tell more or less who lost more about the proportion of the losses between the two sides.
So in this, the Germans had something of a strength and weakness in that they brought their family members, and the Arabs and other people did this too. It's kind of an interesting phenomena. But when they would go into battle, they would have their family right behind them, shrieking like harridans and egging them on and encouraging them in battle. One of the main downsides to this, unfortunately, is if you lose the battle, and the Romans are good at different parts of the battle, better because barbarians are not usually good at this. The Romans are good at pre-battle, reconnaissance stuff. Barbarians are not necessarily great at that. Romans are great at post-battle. So they unleash their light cavalry and they just trample everybody to death.
And also, the Romans don't believe in the concept of war crimes.
Yeah, but this.
So
I usually like to point out what is uncommon, not common. And this is common for everyone back then.
Yes, absolutely.
But what's uncommon is that the Germans have their whole family with them, so then the Romans unleash on everybody, and everybody dies, or is sold in slavery.
Exactly. So basically, and this also
so Marius single-handedly, with the aid of a military force significantly smaller than his German adversaries and a severely demoralized force, he's able, by his administrative skill and reforming the army, but by his tactical genius, to completely annihilate his German foes.
Yes, to the degree that to this day we call one term for the Germans is Teutons, but the tribe of the Teutones, which gave us this term, was wiped out. For all we know, that the Teutones and the Cimbri, we never hear from them again. It's possible that the English and the ancestors of the English were the descendants of the people left behind, or maybe they were the people, or maybe they were descendants of those who managed to go back home, or maybe they are just people, a group that immigrated to the same place, that immigrated to the same place after the Teutones and the Cimbri left their ancient homelands, but they have no memory of this. They
complete annihilation. And this is something that was seared. And let's move to the second incursion. This is something that was seared into the
Roman psyche.
Psyche in memory so much that Julius Caesar speaks about this a lot in his Gallic Wars, and he uses this as some sort of justification when he decides to wage war with limited success against the Germans himself.
Significantly, Julius Caesar is the nephew or the grandnephew, no, actually the nephew of Gaius Marius, and he is also his political successor at the head of his political party or faction, the Populares, and basically his casus belli against many Gallic tribes is, they were conspiring to bring Germans from across the Rhine. We can't have that. Remember what happened last time?
Which they were sometimes. They were. He was right about that.
It was a border. People always cross borders, especially in pre-modern times, and it's not like there was a watch over the Rhine to make sure that nobody goes over there. That's something that the Romans, as we already established, invented later. But it's like, yes, people move there's a body of water and people use it for navigation and people cross it. Shocking.
Amazingly. So you mentioned, so the Rhine River, which flows north to south south to north actually, in Europe, that separates, let us say, France and Germany. They'll just use these terms very
depends who you ask
unadvisedly. So this is something that
you just anger all the Frenchmen and a large portion of the Germans.
How will I sleep at night?
Yes.
So this is something that Caesar and others kind of see as the demarcation against the Germans, and this is something that the Germans have difficulty crossing. Julius Caesar, instead of hiring boats, which has issues, he just builds a bridge across.
Yes.
So an amazing display of German engineering and so on.
Roman engineering.
Roman engineering, not German engineering, which is amazing today, but not then.
It was built in Germany.
Right, exactly.
By Italian immigrant workers.
So he crosses the Rhine twice.
Yes.
The second time, nothing happens.
Yes.
But he does take some hostages. He fights against them, and he incorporates them. He incorporates some of the. So we spoke before about your thing about hostage making.
Yes.
So let me just touch upon this for a moment. So this is a very ancient concept. Ancient Egyptians did this, where the weaker power that maybe is a former adversary or potential adversary would be bullied and kind of intimidated into giving the prince or their other princeling type people, important people's sons, to the stronger power, to Egypt, or in this case Rome. And this would affect several things. Rome would then have a safety that their parents would not rebel against them. They would have a guarantee, and they would maybe assimilate them and teach them their Roman ways. The practical effect...
And the next generation of leaders will be used to be grown in Rome, and they will be somewhat Romanized. They will be more amenable.
Theoretically, we saw already...
And they may or may not have, which is a topic less discussed, some romantic relationships in Rome, which may lead to them having some legitimized or non-legitimized children in Rome, which will forever stay in Rome.
That's very interesting. Yeah, that is not something discussed. I mean, that's definitely... And we saw before with the Germans that could be a downside. So what's interesting is that Julius Caesar had encountered so many different tribes and took so many hostages, especially after each time they rebelled and he had to put down the rebellion, that he had thousands of these people in his camps.
Yes.
And because they were usually the princelings, they would come with horses. So in Germany, for example, most soldiers did not have horses to fight on. Yet,
not good horses.
No, they had no horses at all.
And the ones they had were not good.
The ones they had were not good by Roman standards. They were smaller and so on. So Julius Caesar had, I think, around 1,000 German horsemen. So these were probably higher up or even nobility, and these were his best troops.
Yes.
Or some of his most fearsome troops. At Alesia,
especially when he replaced the puny ponies with proper Roman horses.
So he's using them all the way in Alexandria. So in no other world except for the Roman world would you have Germans fighting the Roman army against Egyptians ruled by Greeks in Alexandria.
Well, Macedonians.
Yes, yeah.
So, but that's just me poo-pooing the Macedonians. Ignore me and my my snobbery.
So this is the second major episode between the Romans and the Germans, and some damage dealt on both sides. Anything you want to add to that, or do you want to now move to the third incursion?
The third incursion we already spoke about. That's Arminius the Cheruscan. But what Julius Caesar started, he started bringing Germans across the Rhine, ironically, and incorporated them into the Roman army, because the only institution the Germans understood in the Roman world was the army, and that's the only institution they could have respected, because everything else seemed weird to them. They didn't understand the Senate. They didn't understand election by ballots. They didn't understand the agricultural system of Rome. They disliked the large slave worked estates of Rome. But the army, that's something they could understand. It's a group of fighting men loyal to a certain chieftain. They are obeying his orders because he rewards them, even though they don't understand why he gives them small pieces of almost worthless coins at regular intervals, instead of honoring and why he sent his servants to do it. Where the much proper thing to do is to have proper feasts, and then to reward each warrior personally with a nice big shield and a spear and other desirable, beautiful stuff. But they can live with it, and that's where a lot of Germans integrate into Roman society, more or less, and that start the process by which, at the end, Rome was Germanized much more than Germany was Romanized, and that was the cause, at the end of the day, of the fall of the Roman order, at least in the West, because at a certain point, the fall was not immediate. It was not traumatic. It was a long process in which, slowly but surely, Rome was the Roman Empire lost its ability to be, properly speaking, Roman, or at least the concept of being Roman was no longer attractive, because of it was not because of the Germans. It was because being Roman became because of civil wars and disasters and ambitious generals and politicians and regressive and repressive laws. Being Roman stopped being that attractive. It usually meant that you were bound to your father's and grandfather's profession. You had a master, even though nominally you were free. And you paid terrible taxes, and you were not safe. And eventually, people say, you know what? When the next barbarian chieftain appeared, who was not that barbarian in terms of, it was not that different from the Roman official, and they decided, you know what? We surrender.
Yes, and in the next segment we will discuss that although the Germans didn't necessarily know what a ballot was, in what manner they did have a form of early liberty and a form of council and democracy, and so on, and we will get to that
in the next segment.
We're doing the next segment of the Iron Rod podcast. We're in episode 7. We're talking about the Germans. Let's speak about another Roman then, because Romans are fun. Now, as we said, we understand the Germans by reading the Romans, because you Germans didn't leave us anything to read on your own, and archaeology is pretty scant. So one of the most distinguished Roman historians, Tacitus, very influential Roman historian and writer, who saw the empire at its worst and in its best, under Vespasian's crazy kids and under Trajan and so on. Tacitus wrote an entire book about the Germans. One of my favorite things that I mentioned before was the Germans being covered from top to bottom in black ink. So I'm not sure actually that was him. He also speaks about cowards being executed if they run away from battle and so on. But you have a line and a quote from Tacitus, Isaac.
They chose their kings by nobility, their captains for virtue. Nor is these kings' powers infinite and free. The chieftains do more by example than by authority. Cornelius Tacitus, Homeland and Dwelling of the Germans, 7:1.
So it's interesting that, Tacitus, when he speaks about the German consuls, this is one of my favorite things. See, German consuls, when people disagreed, they kind of groaned. When the warriors and the consul agreed, they clanged their javelins or their spears against their shields.
Very much. If you ever watch videos of the English parliamentary debates, which are so much better than watching C-SPAN, mainly because every time somebody gives a speech, periodically his side of the aisle would say here, aye, and then the other side says boo, shame, boo.
Good fun.
Yes,
so the
fun.
English, as we said, are real Germans.
Well, Germanic, but the good kind. They were mellowed down by all the French influence.
So in our earlier episode, when we spoke about the Greeks, and I mentioned that the Greeks had invented democracy, or that attribution could be given to them, you said that possibly there was in fact the Germans. So tell us about the German influence on liberty, which is one of the cruxes of the matter that we're going to.
So we discussed in the previous episode the Greeks and how the Greek proved that they are better than you. But the basic notion in Greece was the loyalty that one owes to one's city, to the place and group that you were born into. The Germans did not have this kind. So yes, there was a tribe. The tribe existed in Germany, and the tribe had a specific territory, but it was completely normal for German men to wander and to serve somebody else for a while, and they would be rewarded with gifts, with weapons, with horses, women from time to time. Even though German women had probably more rights than anybody in the Roman Empire had. Than any women in the Roman Empire had, so they were first. So you couldn't just trade them away. Not that you could really in Rome with
and
citizen
generally
women.
German men were monogamous.
Yeah, generally German men were monogamous in the sense they married one woman at a time. It was not universal. So, for example, as late rulers as Charlemagne still practiced concubinage and polygamy to the chagrin of the church, but yes, but back to the point. But yes, to a degree, the idea was, at least the way Tacitus portrays the Germans that he knows about are largely monogamous. He knows that there are some polygamous Germans, but the ones that he knows about are monogamous. So yes, you may be rewarding all sorts of nice things, or if he really does good service, he will be given some land and he will settle down as a nobleman of a different tribe, and he might rise to great prominence. He might one day become the chieftain. He would still show deference to the king. So when we speak about kings and chieftains in Tacitus talks about rex, that's king in Latin, and for captain he says dux. A word that you may recognize is the origin of the modern noble title of duke. Now dux means in Latin, it's not a noble title, it's just a general word for a leader. A leader, somebody who leads men by virtue of his reputation and his not by legal authority, but because as we say, he's a leader of men. Now, this is not the word that the Germans would use. He thinks, as we know, so 400 years after Tacitus, or 300 years, was 300 or 400 years? 300 years, I'm sorry. There's a German tribe that is invited into the Roman Empire by the Emperor Theodosius, and the emperor addressed the leader of this group as King Rex, and the so-called king is very insulted by this. He says, "I'm not Rex. I'm not Rex. I am a judge of my people. My authority is that I am above all the little
Squabbles.
all the little squabbles and all the little regi that are, or kings that are that are over them. When they have disputes, they come to me because they respect me, and when they need advice, they come to me because they respect me. I'm far above those rex, so those regi. So what does he mean by that? So this is here so you mentioned how Latin and Germanic languages are connected because both of them are Indo-European languages. It's such a big group that it might as well be meaningless in terms of, but here we find that a way in which both of them have a very similar word, but they mean different things. So Reich in Reichs in ancient Germanic languages means a leader, means the same thing as dux means in Latin. And that's what Tacitus is referring to when he says
this is the same Reichs from today.
That's where we get the German, modern German word Reich. And by the way, which means to rule, but also to be rich. For example, there's a last name Reichman. It means a man of the Reich, a man of the whole Roman Empire, or it can mean a rich man. If I was a rich man. So if we go back to the quote by Tacitus, they chose their kings, by which he means that elevated position of a wise, of a tribal man, of a tribal supremo, who gives advice and settle disputes and have ceremonial rule by nobility or by noble birth, by descent, because they descend, sometimes they say descend from the gods or something like that. The captains, the Reichs, they choose the Reiki, they choose for virtue, or in other words, you look like a strapping young man, like a strapping man. You are an experienced warrior. You led us in a few raids against the Romans, against the Slavs, and against who knows who. So you know what? I'm listening to you. You think you should go? Where should we go this time? You think you should go? You are willing to lead us across the Rhine to raid some Roman town and get back with a lot of loot? Well, yeah.
So these people are more or less war leaders.
They are war leaders, yes. So in the office of what we call the king, which comes from in Old English, one of the most interesting Germanic languages we know of, cunning, which is also the root of the word cunning in English.
As in like being smart, cunning.
Being smart, cunning. You see where this is going, but it's a practical kind of smart. It's a street smart. It's or in this case, battlefield smart. This is the man who can make quick decisions and make and lay down a trap or an ambush or do other thing. This is the man. This is a war leader, and he's not there because his father was that. But this is an office that is created when some enterprising German leaders decided that they would rather, instead of this having this double system, they can just combine them, and then they become all powerful because they have the prestige and the sanctity of the tribal king, or as they are called in old Germanic languages, in Old English, Theodens. Now, this is a word that everyone who read Tolkien know, because it's the name of the king of the Rohirrims, who are basically Anglo-Saxons riding horses in Middle Earth, or as the Goth called them, Theodans. These you combine the prestige of this office and the claim to descend from the gods or whatever or what have you, with the practical skill and respect that the Reichs have, and then you have a king. And this idea, where they get it from? They get it from the Romans, because they see the leader of the Romans have all the pomp and circumstances of a Theodan, and he gives advice to his people when he sits among the tribal elders as they see the Senate, but he's also a war leader who is chosen by the respect everybody is showing him, or by his reputation, because of course because Roman emperors are chosen not by, there are no fixed succession rules in Rome. So Roman emperors tend to be the most skillful political maneuverers, or the general who bested all the other generals.
Yes, you mentioned before that these people become all powerful, but you mean that in that sense. But in the sense of the individual liberty, their war leader or their king would have very little actual control over their daily affairs.
Because no Germanic tribe contains the political and cultural infrastructure for the king to exercise actual tyranny over his people. The most tyranny he can show is over his retinue. There's a story about Clovis, king of the Franks, that killed one of his warriors that one of his noblemen who want to claim a certain so the Franks just conquered the kingdom of Soissons, the last bastion of Roman rule in Gaul, and they found this very expensive looking vase, this beautiful vase, and one of the noble warriors that are in the king's retinue claimed it as his own. He saw it first, so, and he took it.
I think I read the story in the book of Joshua, but continue.
And the king is very upset because he wants it too. So he orders so he asks for the vase, and so he takes the vase, and the nobleman says no. So, I'm sorry, very sorry, sir. You can't steal away what you can't just take away what I honestly stole.
Don't we have any honor around here?
Yes, okay, exactly.
What happens next?
And I'm a nobleman. I serve you because I respect you. But says, oh, okay, you want this vase? Take this vase. And he brings this very expensive, very heavy vase down on his head, and he breaks his head, and he kills him. And that's where French kinship is born, for what it's worth. And this is where
nobody got the vase.
Nobody got the vase, but everybody got the message. And this is where modern, as in post-Roman kingship, is born the way we know it, because that's where it's understood that the king, at least within his court, is far above these nobles. He's not first among equals. He is something resembling a lord and master in his own court and possibly in his own kingdom, theoretically. But before that, everybody, in one of the poetic terms for king in Beowulf, which is an interesting case of which is a poem about the ancestor of the Anglo-Saxon, written in Old English, but takes place in the old home of the English in what is now Denmark in southern Sweden. One of the terms is ring giver, because the way a king keeps around him all these fine warriors and noblemen is by always giving them gifts. And this is where the
like a ring that you put on your finger.
No, like a ring you put on your arm. He gives them rings. He gives them beautiful and excellent helmets. He gives them horses. He gives them banners. He keeps their loyalty. He keeps them bound to us by giving them gifts, and he doesn't think of it as bribery. And those people are not necessarily from his tribe. They are the best of the best that he can find, and he doesn't think of it as a shameful kind of bribery. And if they happen to find against the native tribe, They don't think of themselves as traders. They think of themselves as engaged in a very noble, in a very noble pursuit of building their own reputation and wealth, and 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 being that's what you do, and that's, by the way, why the part of Beowulf that we read at the beginning of the show is very significant. Because why is it important that all the gifts that Hrothgar, son of Halfdane, gives Beowulf? Because they signify the respect and honor he shows Beowulf, who was a foreign warrior, who is from another tribe, for all his help against Grendel and his mother.
So this idea of the traveling warrior brings up your movie recommendation, which I must admit I have not heard of this movie before now. The Long Ship from 1964. Tell us about it.
Well, The Long Ships is a very interesting little movie. It's based on an excellent novel, which I read, and it's a story of a young man from what is now southern Sweden. Back then was part of the Kingdom of Denmark. He's born a pagan, but there are a lot of things changing in Denmark, and the king is converting to Christianity. At the beginning, he's just kind of listening to Christian missionaries, allowing them to be around. But eventually, he converts, and he converts Denmark with him. And he has a little ability to force people to convert, but slowly but surely, noblemen in court notice that they are more welcome and they get more favors if they attend the mass and stuff like that. And this young man, he starts from a very little village, like most people back then, and he attends with his father, who is a local nobleman, the thing. And it's not that I forgot the word. That's the word for it. A thing. The thing. The thing is the yearly or is the annual or semi-annual assembly of all the people from the entire little tribe, province, whatever you call it, in which they get all sorts of decisions. How do we settle this dispute? Should we? What are we growing on the common land this year? Should we raid the Slavs or the Romans, or the Franks this year?
All important questions.
All very important questions, and this is also the opportunity for aspiring war leaders or raiders to go and assemble a crew, because they're going on a heist, and the heist can take years, in which they would terrorize poor Slavic peasants or Frankish emperors, all in a day's work, and assemble a large amount of wealth, which they'll carry back home and live happily ever after, or at least until the next time. And our young man is going there, and I believe I can find the trailer and
Here it is, the mighty legend that comes to life on the screen. Vikings! Here they come. Now! The adventurers who conquered the world. The lusty Viking warriors who worshipped flesh and devils as they plundered an age. Here they are. Fire! The long ships and the tall men. Searching, slaughtering for the fabled fabulous Golden Bell, the mother of voices. No prize was more treasured, more blood-stained than the Bell of Byzantium, that held half the gold in all the world in one piece.
For the last time, Norseman. Where is the bell?
I don't know.
Perhaps 100 glasses would give you an idea.
Seldom has the screen seen such an avalanche of excitement. Starring Richard Widmark as the Viking leader in search of the Golden Bell. Sidney Poitier as the all-powerful Moorish sheikh. Russ Tamblyn, a young Viking warrior. Rosanna Schiaffino, a queen and a woman in love who used her beauty and her wiles to win the secret of the bell.
I only want the bell.
You too.
I speak for both. My husband and myself.
Yes. And why should he leave such a delicate problem to you?
The Longships also stars Oscar Holmoker, Edward Judd, Lionel Jeffries, Beba Lonchar.
I can see now that you possibly are the daughter of a king.
Touch me and my father will burn your city to the ground.
Against the canvas of love and laughter, Aborges lived with uproarious abandon. Of adventure on the high seas is played the story of the long ships and the tall men who sailed in search of a golden treasure that lay by the pillars of Hercules and for centuries beyond the reach of man.
The girl! The sacrifice meant for the dead! The girl is within witchcraft! Kill him and the woman before he takes us to our doom!
No, not the girl. She's King Harold's daughter. But kill him.
So this is the trailer for the movie The Long Ships, 1964. I think it gives some insight into the freewheeling nature of the Vikings,
And
who in
the-
this respect resemble the Germans, who Tacitus says could be drunk for days at a time without even being worried about it.
And of course, this is the golden age of the Vikings, where they actually went all the way to the Mediterranean and to Byzantium and established the long tradition, proud tradition of the personal guard of the Byzantine emperor being recruited among
The Nagarians.
the Varangians,
Varangians, yes.
among generally speaking Germanic people, so Russians, Danes, Swedes, Norsemen, and also Englishmen.
Fascinating. Up until the 1300s, there were people, claiming to be part of this group or descendant from
As a
these
matter of-
ethnic tribes.
Yes.
In the Byzantine Empire.
Yes, absolutely.
Amazing. Maybe they would have won if they had more of them fighting against the Saracens.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but
that is the 7th episode of the Iron Rod podcast. We will be continuing our series on the origins of liberty. And what is our next topic?
our next topic is, of course, the Judaic origin of modern liberty.
Yes, but however, before we get that, we will be doing more on the Germans. That we had a lot prepared and we didn't get through it all. So, see you on the next episode.